the revolution isn't going to start with a provocation from the revolutionaries. That wouldn't make sense. As Mao said, to go on the offensive before the masses are ready to really get on board with our agenda and assist us in our revolutionary task would be adventurism. We would really be sabotaging our cause before we can even really get it off the ground. The revolution is going to start not with a provocation from the revolutionaries, but with a provocation from the government itself. And I think that in the coming decades, it's inevitable that such a provocation is going to manifest because of the lengths that the capitalist state is going to no doubt take in order to try to retain control amid rising class tensions. So this is the ironic thing about the class war that the state is waging. The ironic thing about the violent, repressive campaign that the state is carrying out. In trying to retain their power, the ruling class are actually making their demise more likely. They're bringing their own demise closer. And I think that in these next few decades, the U.S. government, I say the U.S. government because I live in the U.S., this could really apply to pretty much any other given capitalist government that you may live under. The government is going to carry out a act of violence so shocking, so appalling, that the masses are going to find it unacceptable to the point where they decide to revolt and they decide to get on board with an agenda to overthrow the state and carry out an anti-imperialist revolution wherein socialism is implemented. This provocation is going to take place down the line after conditions have very much deteriorated under capitalism, even more so than now. The conditions are going to need to get a lot more dire, like socioeconomically. Economic inequality is going to have to vastly increase before the provocation takes place within conditions where the masses can more likely get on board with the revolutionary agenda. And also, in order for this this provocation to result in a revolution, the revolutionary organizations, the vanguard, are going to need to be prepared. We who are Marxist-Leninists, we who are anti-colonialists and anti-imperialists, we who have done the studying about proletarian, anti-colonial, anti-imperialist revolution, we need to spend this time building the institutions for revolt, making inroads among the masses, getting the word out about the need for proletarian, anti-colonial, anti-imperialist revolution, so that when the decisive point comes, the masses will have something to turn to in us, in alternative to the existing government. And this is going to be the difference between what happened following the murder of George Floyd and the provocation that's going to occur probably sometime within these next few decades that results in a revolution. Because in this last year, people obviously got extremely angry. The legitimacy of the existing government was tainted, to say the least, and arguably the largest protest movement in U.S. history emerged in this last year in the form of the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. So the anger was there, but the institutions did not exist to siphon this anger in the direction of revolutionary socialism. A lot of it was frankly co-opted by liberals, by the Democratic Party, by Biden, Harris. You know what I'm talking about. What we need to fix, what we revolutionaries need to rectify, is this huge gap which exists in this country, not just the U.S. but in many other capitalist countries when it comes to revolutionary organizing, because there's so much anger that already exists towards the capitalist state, towards colonialism and imperialism, towards the violent acts committed by these capitalist governments, again, not just the U.S., but the institutions for revolt are lacking. We need to build up revolutionary socialist parties, and we need to help educate the masses about the need for proletarian revolution, so that when the decisive moment happens, or when a moment comes that can become the decisive moment, the institutions will be in place to turn that moment of drama into a moment of revolution, into the moment that kicks off the overthrow of the capitalist state. What will this moment look like? It could look like another typical murder of an unarmed black person, like has ignited all of these revolts in recent years. Or it could look like something far, far more extreme, like the government deciding to bomb a U.S. city block somewhere. This actually happened, by the way, in 1985 in Philadelphia, when Philadelphia police, I think it was the police, they decided to bomb an entire city block to snuff out a black militant group. And that's actually what you see in the thumbnail for this video. The wreckage and death and destruction that resulted from the U.S. government's absolutely heinous action. And the reason why that did not result in a revolution is both because in 1985 the institutions were not in place for the population to turn towards the revolutionary vanguard, to turn towards revolutionary socialism. The working class politics in general were demobilized with the implementation of neoliberalism and so on. And also the socioeconomic conditions within the U.S. weren't so dire as to prompt too much of the population to become radicalized in reaction to this. So the conditions preceding the decisive moment, the moment that brings about a revolution, will have a dual nature of, on the one hand, the revolutionaries will have to have built up a sufficient vanguard, to have built up an organization that's capable of taking on the task of carrying out a revolution and mobilizing the masses, giving the masses something to turn to, an alternative to the existing state. And the other aspect will be a deterioration of the general conditions to the point where the masses, or enough of the masses, will be on board with the idea of revolution.